Hi, everybody. I'm the supervisor of the Independent Living Department at Helen Keller National Center. I've worked at Helen Keller for over 22 years. This summer was my 5th anniversary as supervisor of this particular department. And my job involves running the independent living department. I have 4 instructors that are in independent living with me, and we do assessments for the deafblind students that come to the center. So we assess their life skills, things like cooking, cleaning, and we provide instruction on those things. We teach our students how to live as independently and as safely as possible. We also have 2 apartment programs in Helen Keller National Center. We have one that's located in our dorms, which are on campus in Port Washington on Long Island, and we have ones that are located off campus. And those apartment programs are a collaboration of all the departments at Helen Keller National Center, but they're led by the independent living department, but they incorporate skills like mobility skills, communication skills, technology, vocational skills. And the ultimate goal for students is to be able to navigate their homes safely, as well as their work environments. So whatever their work environment entails, we support as well.
And Don, if you could just give us an overview of your position at HKNC.
So I work in the adaptive technology department, and there we teach different skills to a variety of students. Some students are totally deaf-blind, some students are hard of hearing, so it all depends on the modality. We teach Braille displays. We have low vision programs like Zoom Text and speech output programs like JAWS. And we teach people how to access websites, email, text messages, just to get them back connected with the world again. And I have to say that, you know, I work with a wonderful team who taught me everything I know. I joined the tech department about three and a half years ago. And it's just been a wonderful experience because I've been able to watch the students really like master their technology, whether it be using, can I show them some of the technology? A Focus 14 Braille display with an iPhone. Right now, Maricar has her iPhone tethered to her Focus 14, and she can get emails and text messages that way. So I teach people how to access information. And I've taught people how to use their iPads and the QWERTY keyboard with the speech output program to access emails. So it, depending on, you know, on the consumer, we have different goals that we want to achieve, but within the same medium. Like, so yeah, prior to that, I've been working at Helen Keller for 20 years. So prior to that, I was a case manager in the community services program. And then prior to that, I was working in the Communications Learning Center. Mm-hmm. And prior to that, I worked in the vocational services program. And prior to that, I worked in the dorm where I first met Maricar. So I definitely,
yes, it sounds like I definitely want to get to that in a little bit. And I also want to get to, in just a moment, I want to talk about how your jobs have changed during this time of COVID. But before we talk about that, I'd love to just talk about communication for a moment. So maybe, you know, if you, I obviously for people who are tuning in right now, who might not be familiar with different communication modalities in the deafblind community, we can see that, Don, when you're speaking, you're both speaking and signing to Maricar at the same time. Can you talk about what that mode of communication is called and a little bit about what it is for those who maybe have never seen it before?
So I have Usher syndrome. I was born deaf, but I grew up with vision. I learned visual sign language. But part of Usher syndrome is retinitis pigmentosa, abbreviated RP. So with the retinitis pigmentosa component of Usher syndrome, I have progressive vision loss. So at first I had a hard time seeing in the dark, and it got worse from there. I grew up just as a deaf person using visual sign language like most other deaf people. And then as I got older and my vision got worse, I depended more and more on touch and eventually transitioned into tactile sign language. So what you see Don doing is signing to me, but I'm feeling what he's signing as opposed to looking at what he's signing.
And as far as, so thank you for explaining tactile sign language. And Don, maybe if you could speak specifically on the specific modality that you use when, in this case, in an ideal situation, we would have another interpreter on your end so that someone would be interpreting for Maricar, and Don, you wouldn't do both at the same time. But obviously, given the current times we're in and not having people be able to come freely in and out of places, can you explain, Don, what you're doing as in having to both speak and sign at the same time when you're talking? Can you describe what that is?
Sure. Being that I'm talking and signing at the same time, we call that SIMCOM because it's simultaneous communication. And it's not easy because sometimes I lose what I'm thinking and saying in the sign. So hopefully Maricar, she's getting it. Most times she knows what I'm going to talk about because we've talked about it before, or if we're with family and friends, if I'm SIMCOMing with her family, it happens a lot in the community because a lot of times I just don't have another interpreter to pull out of my pocket and go, here you go, I'll interpret. So a lot of times it involves like a little chat after the dinner or after we meet with friends. We'll just chat ourselves and talk about what happened. So this is not the ideal, but it's workable in this situation because of the situation we're in, so.
Absolutely. And again, just correct me if I'm wrong, but to my understanding, sign language has a different sentence structure and syntax than you would use if you were using SIMCOM. So is that a place in which those differ?
Yeah, so tactile ASL follows the same structure as visual ASL. I'm just, receiving it via touch instead of through vision. But there are certain accommodations that have to be made when you are adapting a visual language to a tactile language. So it's very similar, but there are some differences that have to be accounted for.
This is done. But when I'm using SIMCOM, it's not always ASL because I'm thinking in English language and I'll be finger spelling some more things to her that, I would normally sign, and it's not going to be an ASL structure. I try my best, but I'm thinking two languages. So
right.
Others are better than it than me.
Well, a question for both of you about that. Do you feel like because of obviously how well you know each other as a married couple for the last 17 years, that makes communication like SIMCOM, which again isn't the ideal scenario, but what we have to work with in this situation, does that make it, do you have a better understanding of each other because you know each other so well? Does that help the communication?
If we're just talking, then we'll just sign. There's no need to use English. But yeah, if we're around other people, Don is just clarifying the question for Maricar. Yeah. Sorry, I misunderstood your question. Yeah, I can understand Don very well. You know, I can understand when he's sim comps. I can understand when he's using ASL. We've known each other for so long. I'm so used to communicating with him. So yeah, we've got a much better understanding of each other. I can understand him a lot easier than other people.
So let's jump back to both of your positions at HKNC. So you gave a really great overview of what those positions are normally, but obviously things are different now because of COVID, and I understand that in both of your positions you've had to make changes as a result of that. So can you talk a little bit about your roles at HKNC again, but now this time talking about the adjustments that you've had to make because of what's happening with COVID?
Yeah, it's been challenging. You know, deafblind people as a whole are very varied, but in general, you know, even though there's varying degrees of hearing and vision loss, independent living skills really have to be taught in person because the deafblind culture is so heavily dependent on touch. So there's a lot of showing people things via touch or handing equipment to them so they could feel what it feels like. So it's really hard to do something on virtually. And now with COVID-19 has really impacted our ability to teach those skills. We have had to modify our lesson plans and modify our teaching techniques to adapt to this new online environment. You know, we're trying to do our best. We're being as creative as we possibly can with different techniques. My staff has been hard at work thinking about adaptive strategies that we can use in teaching these skills remotely. We've been using Zoom or FaceTime that we can set up to watch somebody work and give them feedback that way. But it is definitely a challenge. It's important that, you know, the student also has to accept where they're at as far as their independent living skills. So we're trying to do our best to provide as many resources as we can, as well as provide virtual instructions. We're enlisting support of families or anybody at home that may be able to support, because there's no instructor in the house with them to explain things. You know, we have specialized equipment at Helen Keller National Center where things are labeled in Braille or with raised dots to mark the stove or the microwave. People may not have that in their homes. So we've had to do a lot of explaining to families of these resources that are available and get their help in supporting the students.
Dom, before we get to you, I just want to say to everyone who's tuning in, again, if you have any questions throughout this broadcast, feel free to write them in the comments section. We'll certainly try to get to those. And also, I see a lot of familiar names popping up and some that aren't. So, I also know we've had people tuning in from all over the place. So I'd love to know where you're watching from. So if you could write in the comments your location of where you're watching from, it gives a really great sense of the diverse places we're able to reach while doing these broadcasts. And it's just fun for us to know where you're watching from. So if you have a moment and you can write in the comments, let us know where in the world you're watching this broadcast from. We'd really appreciate that. And also, I just want to let Don and Maricar know that you're definitely getting a lot of love in the comments over here. There are a lot of people that are big fans of yours. So just wanted to share that with you as well as we continue here.
Wonderful.
So Don, question for you. I know that obviously technology has very much had to become our best friend during this time where we're all communicating remotely. sometimes it's our worst enemy, as we've learned with these live broadcasts. Sometimes things don't go quite the way you plan. But from a technology standpoint, how has your job changed during these times, and what kind of adjustments have you had to make?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a loaded question. So it's changed a lot. I mean, especially I had a lot of students that just recently came in for evaluation. And normally what we do during evaluation and during the beginning of the first training period is recommend equipment, because the student is just learning about the best type of technology for them. And what happened was I had about 3 or 4 students that had just come in, just finished their evaluation, and then all of a sudden they had to go. And now they went home, and I'm learning more about what they have at home. You know, some have more than others, but some don't have the appropriate equipment. So the first challenge is, okay, how do we get that equipment? Is their ICC program up and running? How does that equipment get delivered to them? Because there's some strict rules about, you know, well, they have to meet and set up the equipment. How do we successfully get them that equipment without the contact? So we're thinking about that. Let's see, just evaluating their skills again on what equipment they have. I had somebody at home with a computer screen that was too big for them, and they were having problems accessing it. So one of the things that we had to do is I said, okay, get your iPhone, because they had an iPhone. So I said, get your iPhone, take a picture of the screen, and then text me that picture. And then I would circle what I needed them to find on the screen. And I would circle it, and then they would have to look. I would send the text back to them. They would look at their text. They can enlarge it using the magnification on their iPhone, and then find what they needed to click in on the screen. And that had to go back a gazillion times. And then we would take a break and say, okay, that's it for today. No more. Let's do it again the next time. And for all of that, we accomplished one small part of the bigger picture. So it took a week for that to happen. I involved like the low vision specialist. I put my iPhone on, I clipped it onto my shirt. So it was like a body cam. I'm like, is this okay? And we were doing like some low vision stuff that way. So we're incorporating a lot of different creative ways to make this a successful training for the student. I think it's worked in a number of different scenarios. I have 2 hard of hearing students that I'm working with, and one I call up, and then we work on a voiceover on the iPad with their keyboard commands. And then the other one I call up, and then we use the JAWS speech output program, and I can tandem into his JAWS on his computer, and we can work together, and I can inform him of the commands that he would need to do to access all the stuff he used to access before by using a mouse and a pointer. Now he can do all that using the keyboard shortcuts. So, and listening for the voice output, so he can access his computer again.
So it sounds like obviously each student has different needs, and you're needing to find different strategies tailored to each individual student. So definitely sounds like a lot of a good time for creativity in your department. A question for Maricar. You know, obviously Maricar, you know, you were describing how you communicate through tactile ASL, through touch, but obviously you're having to do your job remotely, where you're not able to communicate tactilely with your coworkers like you normally would. So what are some changes you've had to make around that in order to communicate remotely during this time?
This is Don. I just want to add that I do not interpret for Maricar at all because I have to do my job and she's busy on her job. So now she'll inform you how she's doing all of that without an interpreter. It's pretty amazing. So go ahead.
Yeah, since coronavirus has spread, we've been at home. There's no way to get any tactile interpreting services or in-person meetings. We have those every day when we're at Helen Keller National Center, but at home we haven't had those. You know, I use interpreters for everything, for every meeting, almost, you know, every class, but we both have our own jobs to do. So I can't have Dawn interpreting for me all day, every day. You know, Zoom is something that a lot of people have been using. It's what we've been using for our meetings. All the supervisors of Helen Keller National Center meet. We have our regional representative meetings, all via Zoom, but it's visual. I didn't have any experience with Zoom before this, but I had to figure out how I could use Zoom in conjunction with some type of Braille accessibility. So it's impossible to use Zoom with JAWS to make it accessible on a Braille display. So it would have been hard for me to participate and I didn't want to be left out. So we got a little bit creative. We've tried a couple of different approaches and a couple of different platforms. Not all platforms are accessible or fully accessible with a Braille display. You know, it's also difficult to navigate around certain apps using a Braille display. So some are more easily navigable than others. So what I have been doing is I will join on Zoom, and this way I can sign, much like is happening now, and somebody can voice for me, but the interpreters have been emailing me so I can read in real time on my email what is being talked about. And I also have a Fitbit and an Apple Watch that vibrate when I get an email. So I am alerted that there's an email, I can read it, and it's basically a summary of what everybody is saying. So I am a little bit behind everybody else, and thankfully everybody has been very, very patient in giving me extra time to catch up during these meetings. But I can participate because I am reading these emails, and if I want to make a comment, I tell the interpreter and then everyone pauses for me to catch up and I can participate in the meeting pretty fully.
This is Don. I just want to ask Maricar, are you using the computer for email and your iPhone for text?
Yeah, I have them on separate devices. So I get text messages on my iPhone, and I'll get simple messages from the interpreters like, go ahead and make your comment or something like that. But I use a Focus 14 to pair with my iPhone when I'm going, you know, out and about. But at home, when I use my laptop, I use a Focus 40. It's a little bit bigger, and that works better for me for email. So I will read my text messages on my Focus 14 as they come through and my email on my Focus 40 as they.
So she looks like a concert pianist. Like she has her Braille display on this table, another Braille display connected to her iPhone on this table, and then when she goes, oh, it's your turn to use Zoom, she's just like this, you know, and she's ready to go. And then after she puts her hands down, she goes back onto the what do you call it, the Braille display. I've had the luxury of watching that from like all the team meetings that we've joined, and that way the interpreters will be like, oh, Maricar is just catching up, and then you'll see her move this way, and then when she's ready, she'll sign to the camera. So
we have thank you for that description. It's helpful to like paint that picture. We have a question from Kim Norton. She asks, what is a Focus 14 and a Focus 40?
So there are two different models of Braille display. The reason that focus 14 is called a 14 and a 40 is called 40 is how many characters. So that's a focus 14. You can see it right there. Mm-hmm. So you see the sets of six dots. Each one of those is a cell. There's 14 cells. That makes it a focus 14. A focus 40 has 40 cells. So it's a lot larger.
And this is why you don't have to refresh it as much. So you can read more on the line before having to press the button to refresh. So basically you're going to get half a sentence. And then when you refresh the other sentence, half the sentence comes up with a period. So you know that that's the end of the thought there.
Yeah, and for those who might not be familiar with Braille, as far as like don't know Braille, I think a question that pops up for me, and I imagine some other people have it, is how fast, when you're really proficient at Braille, how fast can you read messages through Braille?
I learned Braille a long time ago. I started learning when I was 22. I didn't use it when I was 22 because I still had vision, but I knew that one day I would need it. So I started learning early so I can make that transition a little bit easier for myself. I've been using Braille completely for about 8 years now. People that are born blind that are reading Braille from a very, very young age are so incredibly fast when they read. I'm nowhere near their speed. And it is a slow process to learn. You have to completely adapt to using your fingertips to feel characters. And it's not easy. So, and it also feels differently whether you're reading Braille on a piece of paper or on a Braille display like what I just showed you. So I love the Harry Potter books, for example. I read Harry Potter book 1. I was able to read visually, but by the time book 7 came out, I transitioned over to large print first, so I was able to read some of the middle Harry Potter books in large print, and by the time Harry Potter 7 came out, I had to read it completely in Braille. So because I was motivated, like I really loved those books and I wanted to be able to read them, I would practice as much as I can. It took me about 20 minutes to read one page when I first started, which is really, really slow. But I started to get faster and faster. Now I read at a pretty average pace, I would say. I can keep up pretty much similar in speed to what I was able to do visually.
Maricar, you are the second person in 4 episodes of Feeling Through Live that have shared their love of Harry Potter. And I remarked last time that came up that I've never read any of the books, and I'm starting to feel like, I'm getting a sign that I need to start reading Harry Potter.
Yeah, you definitely do.
So we have to follow up to the Braille comment, we have a question from Barbara who asks, for those people that have been using Braille their whole lives, can the fastest Braille users read just as quickly as people who are visually reading?
It's individual. So it depends on an individual skill level. Just like some people read faster than other people visually, some people are going to read Braille faster than other people.
And this is Don. I want to chime in here because I'm a really slow reader. I don't know, like even in college and everything, I wasn't the fastest reader. And the stuff that I'm teaching my students has benefited me personally. Like I use VoiceOver while I'm reading one of the Kindle books on my iPhone. So I'll be reading along with the speech output. so I can read that book a little bit faster for myself, and I'll turn the page and I'll do that, and it's fun. And number two, it helps me read faster. So some of these things that we teach can be useful in our personal lives as well.
That's a really great point. So I just want to note, it's really great for those tuning in. I see people are tuning in from all over the place. We've got people from Canada, Los Angeles, New York City, Pittsburgh, all parts of New York and Long Island and Washington and Delaware. So it's really cool to see everyone tuning in. We're so glad that a platform like this allows us to connect with so many different people. If you are just tuning in, I'm speaking with Maricar, Marquez, and Don Horvath, both longtime employees of the Helen Keller National Center, and also a married couple for the last 17 years. So we've just been talking about both of their positions at the Helen Keller National Center, Maricar being a supervisor in independent living, Don being a senior technology instructor. And we've talked about the ways in which COVID has forced them to make changes in their position. I want to now transition to personally, and we have Northern Ireland as well. Thank you, Donna, for joining us again from Northern Ireland. But as we transition now, let's talk about how COVID has affected your personal lives. How do your personal lives look different since COVID has been occurring over the last number of weeks now?
This is Maricar. I am a very, very active person. So before COVID hit, I was really involved in a lot of different activities. I'm a runner. I've run the New York City Marathon before. I've competed in triathlons. I've gone parasailing. I like to get out and do a lot of stuff. I run with my dog, Cliff, who's a black lab and a guide dog. And that group that I run with, Achilles Runners, we would go out all the time, but now because of COVID, we can't do that anymore. So it's not just me, it's everybody that's affected. We just can't be as active as we're used to being. We've been home a lot more. We like to bike together. Don and I will go on 40-mile bike rides pretty regularly. We go on a tandem bike. Now, we just don't have the chance to do that as much. So it's been a big challenge. We've got to figure out different ways to be able to keep ourselves engaged while we're staying home.
Like playing games such as Scrabble and Upwards. I have those in Braille.
I'm going to hold one moment for an interpreter switch. So for those tuning in, we just switched interpreters, which is customary to do in longer conversations like this. Sorry that it took me a moment to pause the conversation to do so, but glad we got an opportunity to do so there. So continuing the conversation, yeah, Maricar, I definitely understand you're very, very active. So I can imagine it's challenging to be cooped up inside so much.
Yeah.
So let's, I'd love to talk a little bit to get to know you. We got to know you both as professionals at HKNC. But, one of the great things about having both of you join us today is that you also have been married for 17 years. And I'd love to just get a little bit more of a sense of your relationship. Maybe we could start with, how you both met each other.
Well, we met at work. We were both working in the dormitory for Helen Keller. We were friends at that time. our communication wasn't that great at that time. When Don first started, he didn't know sign language, and really he just had very, very basic skills. So mostly how we communicated was writing back and forth. We were both dating other people. We had broken up with our boyfriends and girlfriends, and we were just going out often as friends. His signing skills was getting a little bit better because he was really involved with the deafblind population, the signers. So he was just learning naturally and developing that skill. But yeah, we started off as friends and it progressed from there.
Well, also, this is Don speaking. We've had that question asked to us when we teach a sign language class for the first time. And my response is that I met her on a blind date. And we have a quiet class until I say, oh, no, that's, and then she tells the story. So it's
right.
icebreaker.
Right, that's a good icebreaker there. Maricar was just mentioning that your ASL skills are maybe
That was Don.
that you were in the process of. Oh, sorry.
Oh yeah. So going back to Don and his signing skills. So a funny story is that when we were friends, when we were working together in the dorm, we were going out often, and he was developing his skills. We had gone out to eat at Burger King. We were just sitting at the table eating, and he kind of just looked at me and he's like, so we're friends, but are we more than friends, or can we be more than friends? And so, I knew his signing wasn't that great. So I just signed the sign never. And he didn't understand what that sign meant. So I had to finger spell it. I was like, N-E-V-E-R, never will we get together. And he's like, oh, never? I'm like, yeah, no, it's never going to happen. And obviously I was wrong. And you know what I learned from that is never say never.
That's a good lesson. I think also, speaking from the guy's perspective here, Don, I can definitely feel your pain in that moment. But I think, as the kids say, definitely a lot of respect for shooting your shot and taking a chance in that moment. It looks like ultimately it worked out for the both of you. So whatever blow to your ego might have been at that moment, it looks like love prevailed in this case.
Yeah, no more Burger King after that day.
But I think to that question, again, I've obviously had the opportunity to meet both of you over time and get to know both of you, and everyone that's in your lives on a regular basis obviously just knows you as Maricar and Don like anyone else. For those who are tuning in who maybe aren't familiar with the deafblind community or are maybe hearing about for the first time a relationship between someone who's deaf, a person who's deafblind, and a person who's sighted and hearing, I think there's some things around that maybe it's helpful for you to remark on. Maybe the first question around that is for both of you. For Maricar, had you ever dated anyone that was sighted and hearing before Don? And Don, have you ever dated anyone who was deafblind before meeting Maricar?
This is Maricar speaking. Before I met Don, yes, I had dated some deaf individuals, hearing individuals, but I never believed or thought that I would marry somebody who is hearing. But, it's just what happens. You meet somebody and you just fall in love. Doesn't matter, if you are deafblind, sighted, hearing. And when you love each other, you just are able to overcome so many obstacles, learn the communication, and it just works.
And Don, I'm curious from your side, that question for you.
No, I have never dated anybody deafblind before that. So, no, we would go to what do you call it? Deaf happy hours together. And then I'd met a hard of hearing young woman there. And, she wanted to know, I remember when we were dating, oh, well, how did it go? What happened? We would always talk about, who we dated and, what was happening. And, I think, it wasn't until, she got mad at me for some reason at work, and, we got into argument, and she, it was some party I was going to, and I said, I said, well, I don't want to go to that party with you. So I asked another girl out who had recently started at work at that time, and the coworker up there heard me and was friends with Maricar, and the rumor, and Maricar found out, ooh, I got bad text message, AOL, it was AOL IM at the time. So there's two things Maricar helped me out with: my signing and my typing, because it got really fast, because she said, what's taking you so long to type the response back, So then I felt bad, she's mad. I said, so what is this? Why are you so mad? If I'm, I'm asking this girl out, we talked about every other relationship. So something is started, I think, a spark in there. So.
Yeah. I was mad. But, at that time, I didn't realize I had feelings for him. And I was just really recognizing that I actually had feelings for him and I was falling in love.
And, Don, you mentioned that like early on, your signing wasn't so great. I'm wondering just what that was like to navigate that and getting to know someone, obviously in a really personal, intimate sense, like what that was like, kind of the learning curve as far as communication and learning to sign better while, on the fly, essentially, with someone that you're getting to know really well.
That again would happen where I didn't understand what she said, and then I get home, drop her off, and drive back to my house and get on AOL with her to make sure I understand what she's saying. So it was a part of that, and she'd go, she gets so mad at me, but didn't stop her from calling me the next day, asking me where we're gonna go. So, but also, I think I picked it up pretty good. Like I always learn best by watching someone sign. And, at first, when you do sign language, you don't realize how important your facial expressions are to the grammar and syntax of what you're saying, how your body language is important. And it was only 6 months that I was at the residence, and one of the deaf staff saying, wow, we understand you clear, you're improving better. And it's those words, the small words of encouragement that keep you, oh, thank you very much. So, where you think you may look silly to the hearing world, that's the body language, the facial, and I don't have a poker face, so that really helps, because if I'm shocked, I'm shocked. If I'm excited, I'm excited. You'll see that in the way I move and communicate with people.
And so now, flash forward, obviously that was a long time ago, and you've now been a couple for a long time. What is like a, when things are normal and you're able to be out in the world, what might a night out look like for the both of you?
Well, we're pretty active. We love to go to the theater. We love to go to the movies. Some theater performances do provide interpreters, some do not. If they don't provide interpreters, then Don will interpret for me. For example, he loves Star Wars. And I've known the story, and he tends to watch those movies often, and he'll interpret the movies for me. So when we went to the theater to actually see the new Star Wars movie, I think that was it was the newer one, The Force Awakens. So we got there early in the morning because it was less crowded. We sat in the back, and he actually brought these little figurines of the different ships. So that way he was able to actually emulate what was happening on the screen with the figurine, so I can feel it in real time as he was explaining the story of what was happening. So he was able to make those experiences more tactile for me.
Yeah, that's a really informative description there, I think, for those of us who maybe have never seen that method used of communication. I can only imagine, having seen some of the Star Wars movies, those scenes are so intricate that I'm sure having, objects to demonstrate what's happening would be a much clearer picture than trying to describe it through signing.
Mm-hmm. And this is Don. It helped that I saw it like 3 times before the time that I would interpret it. So that was the first new of the Star Wars movies. The second one, she was so excited that it was happening, it was coming out, because she liked the Force Awakens so much. We went that Saturday morning together. And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm gonna have to interpret like 2 hours and whatever. And somebody did me a favor. They pulled the fire alarm in the middle of the movie and it gave me a break from signing. So I thank you, that person who did that. But, everybody else in the theater was mad at you.
Well, thanks for bringing that up, Don. And I love the earnestness of you being happy a fire alarm was pulled while everyone else was certainly upset about it. But I think that brings up a great point, which is, I think for those who aren't familiar with Tactile Asl, there isn't really a great reference point of like the physical demands of it over time. Maybe both of you could speak a little bit more to, a full day together where you're speaking to each other throughout a whole day, what the physical demands are of tactily signing to each other and how you manage that throughout a day.
Well, I'll start with talking about like if we wanted to go on a date, right? Well, I was looking on the internet. I said, oh, wow, we can get cheap tickets for Frozen tomorrow, the play on Broadway. But she had never seen the play. So that morning, I interpreted the movie. I took a break in between, and then we went to the play, and I interpreted the whole play. So I mean, that's like a special day, but on a regular day, it's not as taxing for me because I'm not interpreting for anyone. It's just me. So if I'm signing to Maricar, that's not a problem. I mean, we can talk for a long time because it's that one-on-one, and I'm not interpreting for somebody else. So I think in the relationship, yeah, we need a break. I enjoy going to concerts and movies and even riding my bike, miles and miles away, and then coming back. A lot of times we're together on a tandem bike. As Maricar mentioned before, we love to ride. I mean, we've ridden from our house in Queens to New Jersey and back. So, I mean, we're in hills and everything. So we love biking. So that's something we do together and separately when I can. I don't like to run. So she runs with the club and her friends. We just did a triathlon this past summer where I did the biking and her friends did the running. Special shout out to Erin, Cliff, and Nora, who did the swimming with you. So yeah. So. Oh, Don doesn't.
Yeah, and also Don really doesn't like heights. He has a fear of heights. So I wanted to go hot air ballooning. So I actually went with a friend just for fun for myself. Because Don, he didn't want to go to that because he doesn't like those types of heights. So it was a really great experience. But while we were in the hot air balloon, he was actually in the chase car chasing us. And he would actually have to watch where the balloon goes and follow us. Where we landed was right in the middle of a just neighborhood. We were in somebody's driveway between two houses. It was about 8 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday. And the girls and the parents that were in the house actually were still in their pajamas and actually came out to see this hot air balloon just landing in their actual driveway. And because we had to land there, they actually had to bring the whole balloon down, fold it up. We were able to actually sit on the balloon itself to compress it, to fold it up so we can fit it back in the van. It was a lot of fun.
That's what we call a grand entrance right there, arriving by a hot air balloon.
Yeah.
But, so back to just a question about the tandem bike riding. We have a question from Cindy about how you communicate with each other when you're on a tandem bike.
Okay, so I'm going to preface this by saying, don't try this at home. Okay, I'm very skilled at riding a bicycle. You know, not to mention, you know, when I was younger, I fell off my bicycle a couple of times. That's how this tooth got knocked out. But I'm pretty skilled at biking right now. But what do you call it? When I ride the bike, I make sure, you know, there's nobody else around when I'm communicating with Maricar, where I've looked at, made sure the environment's okay. And if I want to inform her about something, I take my right hand and I go back and I'll sign it to her. I'll tactile sign it to her. Yeah. And she'll know like where we are, what the view is like. I'll be able to tell her what's happening. One time, just for example, I don't know what I'm telling her. I just, all of a sudden, I just see things. I'm like, oh, I got to tell her that. I tell her. One time, she told me she wanted to go to like the chocolate bar for her birthday. And I said, the chocolate bar? Where is that? She goes, it's downtown. I said, where? She goes, remember you explained that to me when we were riding the bicycle down through the East Village. It's over there somewhere. So I said, oh my goodness, you know, so a lot of these things I don't remember telling her. I'm just caught up in the moment. Like I see something like a cocoa bar and I'm telling her while I'm riding a bicycle, and she'll tell me, yeah, Maricar.
Also, remember we were biking the 40 miles in New York City. And we were on this long ride and I had to go to the bathroom. And, you know, of course, I'm in the back seat of the tandem bicycle. And I'm like, how do I tell them I have to go to the bathroom? And so I had this great idea. I used a communication tool called Haptics. And I actually drew on his back the letter T. And I remember he kind of popped up a little bit, and then he was able to reach back to me. I told him I had to go to the bathroom. So we actually were able to pull the bike over so I can go to the bathroom. So we use haptics as well as tactile sign language while we're riding to be able to communicate. We've also established a few different cues with one another, so that way it's a little bit of a shortcut to be able to communicate on the bike.
This is Don. I just want to add, not only do we tandem bike, but we tandem with the kayak as well as we go canoeing sometimes. So that's harder because you're a distance away and you don't want that boat to tip over. We've actually capsized one time in the Manhasset Bay, but that wasn't the fault. That was a faulty boat. That wasn't us. No. And we had the dog with us. So
sure, Don. Blame it on the boat. Blame it on the boat.
Yeah. It was leaking. It fell over. You should have saw her face. You should have saw her face. She looked back at me. And she smiled because she knew we were going over. It was like,
oh, I remember that.
Yeah. So we had Dixie in the boat, and then Dixie is climbing up my head, trying to keep, she had a life preserver, and we're in the middle of Manhasset Bay, and we had to flag down a boat. And then I had to go get all the stuff that was in that tandem boat. But we have a better one than that. And what we do is we tap the side of the boat, so she knows that she needs to stop rowing or whatever, and I tell her stop, don't, I'll tap the side, and then another 2 taps, she'll go back to doing that. So to actually rowing. So we've done that with the kayak and the canoe, and we've just had that. Those were fun times.
So we're kind of at time here. I hope we can just go a few minutes longer for, this is to the interpreters and caption everyone on the call here. There's just a few more things I want to get to. So shoot me a message if you need to go right now, but hopefully we can go a few minutes longer here. We have a question from Alana for Don. Don, do you ever hear someone voice interpreting for Maricar and feel like they're missing something she's communicating that you were picking up on because you were so close to her? And do you ever correct them because you just feel like you know what she's saying more intimately than in the voice interpreter in certain cases?
I don't correct. Maybe like in a discussion, I will add to that if there's a discussion after that, or if I can like chime in, raise my hand and say, oh, this is what happened. But I never want to correct an interpreter. I've been in that role, and I just feel like, there's a better way to feed. If there's a better way to feed the information, that's nicer than to say, oh no, you're wrong. Let me explain this better. No.
So with the last just couple minutes here of this conversation, back to, that was a really informative how you described, how you go to see a movie, in the case of Star Wars, having the figurines to act out the battle scenes. Can you maybe just like tell us about what it's like to maybe be out, say on a double date with another couple, and how you might say navigate that, or maybe when you're back at home with each other's families, when you're out with other people, how you negotiate that?
Well, when it's with family, everybody within my family, they have different skill levels. Don is the most skilled out of everybody, but I also have a deafblind sister that I can communicate with. So some members of my family maybe just fingerspell, maybe they can sign, or we have to use other modes of communication where we text back and forth to communicate, or we use gesturing, so we make it work.
And are there times where maybe if you're out with another couple, maybe that doesn't sign, like how you might navigate that situation?
Well, this is Don. This would be similar to what's happening today. It would be, me interpreting what they're saying or trying to get involved, So it's different for them, of course. And it's really, I do this all the time, so it's not, she's not going to get everything that's involved in that communication. And I've informed her, I said, I'm going to miss stuff because they're not going to know to turn take, I don't want to say, oh, okay, remember you have to slow down and turn take. I want the conversation to happen naturally because I don't want people put off and not wanting to go out with us. And it's happened before. It's like, oh, I don't feel comfortable because I can't communicate with her. And it just feels like it's, the guy's talking because her voice is my voice. When I'm interpreting for her, you're hearing my voice. So it sounds like, I may be dominating the conversation, but I'm interpreting for her, So it's not like right now where we have female interpreters interpreting from Maricar, and it feels more natural. for the people watching and that. So if I go out with Maricar and the other couple doesn't know sign language, it's just it makes on me, I'll be interpreting the whole conversation. So.
And just like on a question for Maricar, are there ever situations where you're out with, say, another couple or other people where it's frustrating for you or anything like that?
I guess, but it's normal for anybody who's deafblind. You experience frustrations. You miss out on some information. Like I had mentioned earlier, I grew up sighted. And over the years, I lost my vision and I really started to miss out on some of that environmental information or little nuances in a conversation, but you have to adapt. You go from being a visual person that you really cherish on all your visual senses, but to you now really focus on more tactile information. And you're now dependent upon somebody giving you that environmental information. And, so you have to be patient. Sometimes you can't get all that information and you have to really kind of make that judgment call. If the person that you're depending on, maybe they can't provide you all that information because it's too much, that's fine. And, you have to look at both perspectives.
That's well put. And for our final question here today, and it's kind of related to that, from just speaking a question to you two as a couple, I think obviously like any couple, you spend a lot of time with anyone and there might be times where you're frustrated or, upset with each other. But obviously for you two to communicate, you need to be touching each other. Are there times where how do you navigate, just quite frankly, how do you navigate like an argument? I'm just curious from that perspective if people maybe aren't familiar with a form of communication where you're always having to touch each other.
We're like any other couple. We're normal. There's still a lot of body language, vocalization. Yes, we communicate through tactile sign language, but you could also feel that body language through the hand. So if somebody's frustrated or angry, I can feel it. I know it. And I also know Don. I know him. I know his movements. I know the pace of his movements. And a lot of times the pace of his signing really matches his tone or his feelings and the emotions at that moment.
And before we conclude today, Don, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Oh yeah, I just scream. I go, I get so mad, I scream. I yell. So, I think it's normal, if you're angry or what have you, if you're in an argument, you have feelings, they're going to come out, but, it's, I think with everything at the end of the day, I think everybody has those situations in a marriage, and then, you find ways to, try to work things out. I mean, and, I think, I don't know, like, I don't know, do you have anything else to say? Yeah. Well, the question is, do I have any perspective on, I think sometimes it's best to, because we're always attached to each other, sometimes it's best to have your own life. And that's, I think, for every person, you need to have what you like, what you're interested in. It doesn't always have to involve the other person. So I think that's the important piece to take away. Dependency, is one thing, but, learning how to access the community through volunteers, SSPs, and, finding other ways to do things that you can bring back to the relationship and say, oh, this is what I did. Oh, wow, that's cool. You did that. I went to a concert. She's not interested in concerts. She's going to a few, but it's not as interesting for her. And for me, I mean, I prefer to go myself and enjoy rather than interpret something that I enjoy, So I think it's important that each of us has our own interests. I mean, we have common interests and then we have separate interests.
Well, that's so well put, and I think that's a great place to end today. I'd certainly love to keep talking with you both, but we're at time here. But thank you so much for joining us today. I hope we can all chat again soon. Again, thank you for everyone who tuned in to episode 4 of Feeling Through Live. We'll be doing these every Friday at 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern time, and perhaps add some other episodes in there in the future as well, in addition to those Friday episodes. So keep an eye out for future episodes. And thank you again so much to Maricar, Marquez, and Don Horvath for joining us today. It was so interesting to hear about both of your roles at HKNC and also giving us a little bit of view into your life as a married couple. So thanks so much. Thanks to everyone who tuned in.